It was a compelling little sentence that got you thinking and wondering about this character, Fred. What was he doing the night before that he's so tired in the morning? Is it just this preacher or other preachers that he yawns during their sermons? You get the idea. It wouldn't have been as compelling if I had simply said, Fred was tired and didn't like going to church. Showing, rather than telling, connects us in a more meaningful way. And I think it's not only true for things like literature and media and movies, but this phrase, I'm also believing, applies to the concept of hope as well. We've been talking and exploring this concept of hope for the entire Advent season. We're calling this hope in different locations, and each week we've been encountering the ways that hope comes to us in different places at different times in different ways. And one of the things that I'm realizing over the course of this month-long exploration is that hope is so much more meaningful when it's shown to us rather than just told to us. If you're going through a hard time and I simply said to you, don't worry, it'll all be fine, that's nice, but wouldn't it be much more powerful if I showed you signs of the ways that God is still at work, signs of the ways that things could be different or better? I think that's exactly what's happening. In that reading we heard from the book of Isaiah earlier in worship. Anel did a great job reading it for us. We saw it there on the illustrator. And it's these words from Isaiah that were issued to a people who found themselves in a wilderness moment. A little background on the context of it. The Israelites had been defeated by the Babylonian Empire and were sent off into exile. They were separated from their homeland. They were separated from their family. Many of them were forced to live almost as slaves in exile in Babylon. And so this is a desperate moment for them, where they're wondering if things will ever be well again. And along comes the prophet Isaiah, and what he could have said is just told them, relax, it'll all be fine. But that wouldn't have been very compelling. And so instead, what Isaiah strives to do is to show the Israelites what hope can look like. If you look at the reading from Isaiah, it's on the front cover of your bulletin, you will notice there is so much rich imagery in this passage. Isaiah describes the deserts blossoming. He describes weak hands being strengthened and feeble knees being made firm. I know we've had a lot of knee surgeries out there lately. I'm sure this comes as good news to many of you. And it goes on from there. He talks about water rushing in the wilderness and then says, the ransomed of the Lord will return to Zion. That is exactly the picture of hope that these Israelites have been longing for. They're wondering if they'll ever get to return to Jerusalem and worship God in the temple again. And Isaiah creates these beautiful pictures showing them what hope will look like. So yes, with something like hope, I think it's more powerful to show rather than tell. And that's why also I'm so grateful to have the choir here this morning performing this special piece of music on this particular Sunday. Because I tell you, and Pastor Gary tells you, and Intern Rita tells you about the promises of God all the time, don't we? But sometimes we need something like music to really show us in a deeper way what this is all about. Music uses melodies and harmonies and descants and rhythms and dynamics to express ideas so that those ideas might connect with us in a more compelling and a more meaningful way. Why do you think that after we finish the sermon, we always have to sing a hymn? It's because I might have spent 12 minutes trying to tell you what this is all about, but then we need music sometimes to show us what the promises of the gospel really are trying to communicate. And so what a joyful day where we get not only told about hope, but shown some of this hope coming to us. Now with all this in mind, this was all set up for you to listen to this gospel reading from the book of Matthew. It's printed in your bulletin, but I'll read it for you now. And I want you to be thinking about not only wilderness moments that the characters are encountering, but how Jesus responds to that. Listen now for this gospel reading from Matthew 11. When John the Baptist heard in prison what the Messiah was doing, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we waiting for another?" Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you see and hear. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. And blessed is anyone who takes no offense at me." As they went away, Jesus began to speak to the crowds about John the Baptist. "What did you go out into the wilderness to look at? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? Someone dressed in soft robes? Look, those who wear soft robes are in royal places. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'See, I am sending my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare your way before you.' Truly, I tell you, among those born of women, no one has arisen greater than John the Baptist. Yet the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." So we hear in this gospel reading about John the Baptist who's in prison. And he's done a lot of work in his lifetime trying to prepare the way for Jesus. But now that he finds himself in a wilderness moment, he's having his doubts. He's starting to wonder if Jesus really is the Messiah who he's been preparing the way for. And so he sends his disciples ahead to ask Jesus, like, "Are you the one, or is it somebody else?" And notice how Jesus responds. Jesus says, "Go tell John the Baptist about what you see and hear." You see, when we're in a wilderness moment, like John the Baptist, it can be really powerful to be shown what hope looks like. Jesus reminds John about the lame receiving sight, the deaf hearing, the lame walking, the blind receiving sight, the deaf hearing, the poor receiving good news. Jesus is showing John that yes, his work has not been in vain. There is hope even in your doubts, John, even in your wilderness moment. I hope that this passage is a comforting reminder to all of us that it's okay to have doubts. Even John the Baptist, whom I'll remind you, Jesus says is the greatest among those born, even he had his doubts in a difficult moment in his life. And so we're in good company if we too ever find ourselves in a moment like that where we're wondering and questioning. But notice also the way Jesus responds. I think when we're in a wilderness moment, when we're filled with questions and doubts, we might do well to listen to what Jesus says. Take a step back and notice what you see and hear. Maybe you're in a situation like this morning. You had some doubts as you walked in this morning. Or maybe in the near future, you'll come across a wilderness moment in your life. Whatever the case might be, I encourage you to take a step back and to notice what you see and what you hear. Are you hearing beautiful music that's hundreds of years old sometimes, that's been uplifting people of faith through all sorts of different circumstances? Are you seeing people gathered together every single Sunday to worship and glorify God, even despite the struggles that they're facing in their individual lives? Are you hearing about Jesus' Last Supper, where he took bread and wine and established this ritual so that we might always have a way to intimately connect with his sacrifice and his promises of love? That's, friends, just what we're seeing and hearing at church. What are you seeing and hearing in your life? Take a step back and notice the words of encouragement or care you're hearing from friends and family. Take a step back and notice the little actions of love that are encountering you each and every day. The truth is, friends, God is sending signs of hope to us again and again and again. And our job is simply to take a step back and start to notice those signs. Because after all, God knows that it's more powerful to show hope than to simply tell about it. For thousands of years, God tried to tell the Israelites what they were to do. God said to Moses, "Hey, here's 10 commandments. Send it to the people and tell them this is how they should live." God continued to tell the people, have no other gods because it's only going to make you more lost. And then finally, God decided, maybe I should just show them. And so God came down from heaven and was incarnate, we say, born of human flesh, as an innocent, vulnerable baby, to unwed parents, in a stable. God chose to enter the world in the humblest, the most fragile of circumstances. God chose to enter the world in what we might describe as a wilderness moment, so that then we would know that when we're in the wilderness, God's there too. God didn't just tell us, God showed us that there's nowhere God won't go for our sake. And so we can move forward with confidence, knowing that we have this loving, compassionate companion, God with us. For wherever the wilderness might arise, we know that there is still hope, for we have this God with us. It's been shown, it's been told. Thanks be to God for these promises. Amen.